Whitey has started to fight back, and it is beautiful. With hundreds of lawsuits filed all across America and even in parts of Europe, it is now going the court's way to destroy racist DEI initiatives. For make absolutely no mistake, yes, offering a $20,000 grant only open to black women is racist. It is active discrimination. Offering a college scholarship that is only open to children with part Hispanic origins is racist. And indeed, even something as minor as offering discounted tickets to people of color is in fact racist. The only reason why any of this has been allowed for as long as it has is because this form of racism was protected by the state and a thin veneer of justification and morality. Let's have a little read of here, shall we? Conservative groups have brought dozens of lawsuits since the Supreme Court decision in 2023 that ended affirmative action in college admissions. You might remember this one, by the way, as a group of white college students sued a school arguing that their grade point averages were high enough to meet admission levels. And people who did not meet that same level as they did were enrolled where they were denied, specifically, explicitly, and intentionally due to the color of their skin. Their ambitions are grand to push that change beyond universities into other areas of American life, including corporations, law firms, healthcare, the arts, and private non-profits, and entertainment, as Disney is also currently having a lawsuit just like this pushed against them too. And in some cases, they are using a novel strategy employing a Reconstruction-era laws that are intended to ensure the rights of black people against DEI programs. That is correct, because the majority of the laws currently being cited to destroy DEI are those introduced against racism. It is just that for the first time in the history of, well, the modern world, we have arrived at the conclusion that, hold on, white people have rights too, apparently. In many cases, they are claiming easy victories, lawyers on both sides say, with defendants buckling soon after the case is filed, because it is blatantly illegal. My boss says the air war has been won, and now we have to do the dirty work of going house to house and taking out these programs one at a time. That is a beautiful way of putting it as well, as this is of course everywhere. We even have, every time we need to talk about this, we've got an article from like 2 days ago going, Women in Gaming New Manifesto calls for rebalancing gender representation and fairness across the industry. Well, you see, there's too many white men in the gaming industry, and we've got to get rid of them via more deeply interfering operations and, well, giving more money to the correct genders and races. Now, hold on there a second. I also remember an infographic from literally last year stating that 35% of game developers are white, male, and not part of the LGBT community. The game industry continues to grow and change along with its players, while the industry remains largely white and male. A few key data points show how the developers community is becoming more diverse. Largely white and male. Remember here, yet again, this has nothing to do with diversity. This has nothing to do with representation. It is an active racist campaign against white men. And women, they'll come for you eventually. Don't worry about it. As even 35% in an industry that I damn near guarantee you comes majoritively from white countries, 35% is too much. That is still unfair and must be dealt with. Again, this is simply seeing justice done. The number of lawsuits underscore both the way race-based preferences have embedded themselves into society as a means to overcome deeply rooted racial discrimination, incorrect, and the anti-affirmative action movement's relentless determination to end any advantages perceived to be unfair. No. It is not the deeply rooted racial discrimination that is they are attempting to overcome here. That has already been overcome. We overcame that in the tail end of the 90s. In fact, we could even argue earlier than that, with the general introduction of anti-discrimination laws. There are no more deeply rooted racial discriminations. They don't exist anymore. And the anti-affirmative action movement of relentless determination to end any advantage perceived to be unfair. There is no perception involved in this, absolutely none. When there is a $20,000 grant given solely to black women, that is not perceived unfairness. That is somebody is given $20,000 for their race and gender. And the fact that we still have the balls to write idiot nonsense like this speaks very loudly indeed as to how deep the indoctrination has been. Taken together, the lawsuits could change the legal landscape, starting with diversity, equity, and inclusion programs themselves. Some DEI programs are used by universities, businesses, and others to help create a talent pipeline. No, they are all racist. They must all be abolished, and everyone who used them needs to be dragged through the courts until they're out of money. President Trump has issued an executive order banning DEI efforts, but the lawsuit, should they reach the Supreme Court, could enshrine that order into law, making a broad array of programs illegal, according to some lawyers defending the program. I would call it a multi-pronged assault on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Thank God, yes. Said David Glasgow, head of the Meltzer Center for Diversity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Wow, imagine that. Yet again, who are the ones arguing for DEI? It's universally the ones that stand to gain from it. And the sole singular reason why any of this has ever existed to begin with is due to the tacit acceptance of the white man, who has, for some reason or another, been browbeaten into believing that he is the source of all evil and must flagellate himself in order to throw off the crimes of his ancestors. Lenton said the point was not to favour white people. We're looking for neutrality, he said. We're not interested in creating culture of white racial grievances. Well, that is entirely correct, and that is why the DEI programs must end. Ms. Lenton said he has used the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, which forbids engaging in a conspiracy to deprive someone of their civil rights. Fucking beautiful. Absolutely fantastic. And again, as I said, these programs and laws were all instituted to create racial equality, not advantage one group over another. More commonly, he and other lawyers are citing another Reconstruction-era law, Section 1981 of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. It was adopted to protect formerly enslaved black people from discrimination by giving them the same rights as white people to write and enforce contracts. Beautiful. You are not allowed to engage in a contract that is aggressively against one race or another. That's all you need to know. The recent lawsuit argues that Section 1981 protects white people as well as black people from discrimination. It is an interpretation of the law the Supreme Court upheld 50 years ago, and that is now being revived to challenge racial preferences. Perfect. Ironically, they're using that statute as a way to dismantle programs designed to assist racial minorities, said Jason Schwartz, a partner in the law firm of Gibson Dunn, which has represented several defenders in DEI cases. There is no irony in it whatsoever, because this is not a question of whether or not you have a right. You have. It is a question of whether or not you are denying that right to white people, which you are. A flood of cases. One of the most tenacious groups is the American Alliance for Equal Rights. Beautiful, beautiful name, and thank you very much, sirs, for your service. Found by Edward Bloom, the architect of the Supreme Court case against Harvard and the University of North Carolina. That decision upended the way colleges had shaped a racially diverse class of students for almost 50 years. So this was the case I mentioned previously. The racially diverse class of students was all artificially created. It was not based on merit, achievement, or one's actual fitness or ability to enter into those programs. It was based on skin color and occasionally genitalia. Mr. Bloom, who is not a lawyer, said he started the alliance in 2021, anticipating that if affirmative actions were overturned, he could test the ruling in other arenas. In court papers, the alliance described itself as a membership organization dedicated to ending racial and ethnic classifications across America. It has now orchestrated 22 cases challenging racial preferences outside the realm of college admissions, with the majority of them relying on the Reconstruction-era contracting law. After being sued, the defendants have changed or ended their programs in 14 of those lawsuits. According to Mr. Bloom, the other 8, he said, are still being litigated. And again, I want to point out here, the only reason why this has been legal, as it is blatantly illegal, is because we have accepted it as a society morally. There is a rather famous case from England, for example, where back in the day there were all kinds of gentlemen clubs where men could go to be men and talk and, well, drink themselves out of their heads. Many British things. But that was determined to be illegal because this was an exclusive male space and we can't have that. Definitely not. And so they were made illegal. But there still existed exclusive female clubs, like gyms, for example. And one particularly famous example had a man go into one of those, be denied a membership on the basis of his genitalia, and then suing the gym. This is the equality you demanded. And again, the only reason why that wasn't even litigated earlier, or that the police simply showed up and went, you can't actually do that, is because we as a society morally allowed ourselves to be browbeat into thinking that somehow we didn't have rights. To find potential cases, Mr. Bloom said he wakes up early to scour the news. Prospective clients also come to him. There isn't a day that goes by that I don't get 5, 6, 7 emails describing what someone believes is racial discrimination, he said. Most do not have the evidence needed to build a case. But some do. Kevin Lynch, a composer, was rankled by a BIPOC night, offering discounted admissions to patrons who identified as Black, Indigenous, or people of color. Hailed by Playwrights Horizon of the Broadway Theatre at a November showing of its popular play Practice about an abusive theatre director. Because Mr. Lynch is white, he paid $90 for his ticket that night, which would have cost $39 if he had been a person of color, according to court papers. This, too, is something else we have seen in cases in Europe as well, with bars, for example, offering drinks at a discounted race based purely and solely on the color of one's skin. He filed a class action suit in December, accusing the theatre of racial discrimination against patrons who did not receive the discount. In effect, white people, it cites Section 1981 of the 1866 Civil Rights Act. Mr. Lynch is represented by Conservoy McCarthy as a Washington, D.C. area law firm that also represented students for fair admission in the Harvard case. Mr. Lynch declined the interview but sent an email saying he was saddened by the isolation and segregation he had experienced while attending the show. Playwrights Horizon declined to comment. We've also seen this pushed in universities as well, and of course, it is all for racial and political reasons too. And if we want even further examples of that, this beautiful thing popped up literally 2 days ago. This is Jean-Luc Mélenchon, or something along those lines, leader of a French political party. He is speaking frog, of course, but the text says it all. So, let's wait for the thing to scroll here. There we go. Of the capacity of our list to embody a new France, that of the Great Replacement. We need municipal elections that can demonstrate the ability of our lists to embody the new France, the France of the Great Replacement. So what he is arguing for here is a change to election law to favour, well, you know what they're gonna favor. You know all too well what the point of this indeed is. And I must say, whilst the Germans did a lot of bad things in the 30s and the 40s, their propaganda has proven to be rather fucking prophetic, hasn't it? Other conservative groups are challenging government programs. The Trump administration has made their work easy by typically not attempting a defense against the lawsuits. Of course not. Why would they? Pacific Legal Foundation, a libertarian and public interest law firm, has represented the plaintiffs in about 30 lawsuits since the Harvard decision, according to Joshua P. Thompson, Director of Equality and Opportunity Litigation. They include several challenges to professional boards, such as those for medical examiners and I don't know what that is. They reserve certain seats for members of racial minority group. So far, it has won 13 cases and lost 1. He said most of the rest are still being litigated. And this also goes to explain the scope and scale of the problem. If this was merely within gaming, right, or merely within entertainment, or some niche field, or if this was done solely on the basis of individual companies wishing to be actively racist, then that too would be illegal and bad. But this isn't. This is a large-scale political movement that has infected the Western world. In fact, there was what was that name of the company a while ago? Something run by Baby Ghost something. I forget the name of it. Canadian DEI program, where it was held up as the example of DEI in video gaming, as the company pushing this ideology into gaming. That was, of course, a very optimistic way of viewing it, as this isn't a company. If you search on Google for DEI companies, you will be given hundreds, if not thousands, of listings, as this is not merely even just a political tool or a private tool. This has become big business. And sadly, only the United States of America has, up until now, had the balls to simply just ban it. And yes, indeed, it is an attack on DEI. Mr. Bloom's opponent says many of his discrimination cases take on programs and scholarships that fit roughly within the umbrella of DEI by encouraging diversity. Yes, it does, because encouraging diversity via quotas is by definition racist. For instance, his alliance-filled lawsuit against McDonald's and the American Bar Association for sponsoring educational scholarships dedicated to certain minority groups. After being sued, both organizations opened their programs more broadly. McDonald's settled the lawsuit while the ABA case is ongoing. I think they've been remarkably effective, actually, in expanding these principles into other areas of law, said Mr. Schwartz of Gibson Dunn, discussing the alliance. His firm has a DEI task force and puts out regular updates on policy and litigation to help employers navigate the increasingly thorny environment. And yes, I am not missing the point with the name there either, mind you. Mr. Bloom calls the DEI a fuzzy concept, asking, what do we mean by diversity? No one's ever really answered that question. Well, that's because they know the answer, but it would make them look very, very bad. So what diversity means explicitly is anti-white and anti-Western. That is the definition of diversity. This is one of the many monstrous offshoots of Gramscian ideology intended to undermine and destroy Western society. Very, again, explicitly, that is its purpose. It is not to give you better leaders. It is not to give you better outcomes. It's not to be more fair, as again demonstrated by this. It is about the erasure and the extinction of white Western society. That is the definition of diversity. And he argues that awarding benefits like scholarship and contracts by race has always been illegal. Well, not always, but for the last 200 odd years anyways. But in the era of affirmative action, there may have been some ambiguity. Shoot me right now. I'm gonna give up. And people looked the other way. Ambiguity. Close enough. Mr. Bloom conceded that some of the lawsuits seemed like small potatoes, but he said the point of legal advocacy is to apply the law. And even in small cases, there could be larger goals. In August 2023, Mr. Bloom's Alliance Group sued the Fearless Fund, an Atlanta-based venture capital firm, over Streamer's grant contest for black women. The two sides settled the case after an appeals court found that it was likely to succeed. The lawsuit seemed to challenge the very existence of the Fearless Fund, which is dedicated to closing the gap in venture capital funding for businesses run by women of color. And this is also a thing that has been consistent within government and NGOs as well. Organizations like Black Lives Matter, organizations that solely and only benefit one group of people determined by race. This has been a long-standing and active grift within progressive communities and, well, simply just a way to funnel money out of big corporations who wish to buy forgiveness from the Church of Progressivism by throwing money at them. And hey, if that money actually made it to the community, I could even see an argument for it. Are blacks in America disadvantaged, whether through their own fault or wider societal significant impacts upon their lives, where they live, or the epidemic of fatherlessness? Sure, we can absolutely have a debate about that. And we did. We even agreed to see through the fingers on all of these blatantly racist programs specifically because we wanted to help. You have worn out your welcome. And this reminds me of a skit by Christopher Titus years and years ago, now a woefully progressive comedian. He had a bit that ended with that Whitey should apologize for all of the crimes it has committed against all the other races, for being better at them at war, for being better at them at technology, for being better than them at governments. Whitey would simply stand up and say, "We're sorry," and that's it. We're done. All the racial grievances are over, and we can advance into a bright new future as equals, the way Star Trek would have wanted. But he ended that skit with the following warning as well, as every white person in the audience all said, "I am Whitey and I am sorry," in perfect cacophony unison. And so Titus simply said, and to everybody out there, everybody non-white, I recommend you accept our apology. Because did you see how quickly we got organized? Until next time, I have been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I do hope to see you all again soon. Till then, have a good day.